In 1937, 23 soldiers pose after their victory in Belait. Only one raises his hand. 80 years later, historians discover that this desperate gesture concealed a deadly betrayal. And before continuing, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any new videos. The Madrid Military Historical Archive preserved thousands of photographs from the Civil War. But this particular image had remained catalogued simply as arrogant front propaganda. 1937. Dr. Carlos Mendoza, a historian specializing in the conflict, had seen it dozens of times without paying special attention. It was a typical photograph of the era soldiers posing to demonstrate high troop morale. However, one November morning in 2017, while preparing an exhibition about war propaganda, something caught his attention. The image showed 23 soldiers from the Republican 5th Division posing in formation after taking an Aragonese town. All maintained standard military posture, arms at their sides, eyes forward, serious expressions. All except one. In the second row, slightly to the left, a young soldier raised his right hand in what appeared to be a salute. His face, unlike the others, showed a barely perceptible smile. Carlos adjusted his glasses and brought the photograph closer to the lamp. There was something about the position of that hand that did not fit Republican military protocols of the era. "Why only him?" he murmured. In all his experience researching war photographs, he had never seen a formation where only one soldier broke the uniformity of the group. Republican commanders were especially strict about photographic discipline used for propaganda. On the back of the photograph was an annotation in faded ink, Belch. October 1937, after victory, complete unit. But there was something more, a small number written in pencil in the lower corner, 231. Carlos did not yet know it. But he had just discovered the first clue to a betrayal that would change the course of the most important battle on the Aragonese front. Carlos decided to digitize the photograph to analyze it more precisely. Using the archive's high-resolution equipment, he enlarged the area where the soldier with the raised hand appeared. What he discovered left him perplexed. The soldier was not making a standard military salute. His hand was positioned in a very specific way. 3 fingers extended, thumb and pinky folded, the palm slightly inclined to the left. In addition, his position in the formation seemed deliberately calculated to be visible from a specific angle. "This isn't military protocol," Carlos murmured as he compared the image with Republican instruction manuals from the era. None of the official salutes matched that gesture. It was as if the soldier were sending a message to someone outside the frame. He immediately contacted Elena Vargas, an expert in codes and wartime communications from the Complutense University. Elena arrived at the archive that same afternoon, intrigued by Carlos's description over the phone. "Carlos, this is extraordinary," Elena said after examining the photograph for an hour. "The gesture matches signaling codes used by intelligence services during the war. But there's a problem. This specific code doesn't appear in any Republican manual." "What do you mean?" "Look at the finger position. It's a Francoist intelligence code. It means imminent danger or a compromised mission. But that would be impossible, because according to all records, this unit was completely loyal to the Republic." Carlos felt a chill. If Elena was right, they were looking at evidence of an infiltrator in the Republican ranks who had managed to communicate with the enemy during an official photo session. "We need to identify this soldier," Carlos said, "and find out what happened to this unit." After the photograph was taken, the investigation was about to reveal one of the best-kept secrets of the Spanish Civil War. The search through military archives uncovered disturbing information about the 5th Division. Carlos and Elena spent days reviewing files, battle reports, and official communications. What they found challenged the official version of events in Belchite. "Here's the problem," Elena said, pointing to a classified document. According to the official report, Thefts Division participated gloriously in taking Belche and continued advancing toward Zaragoza. But look at this other document, dated a week after the photograph. Carlos read the report with growing astonishment. 5th Division complete casualties after enemy ambush. 23 soldiers dead. Cause: compromised information about Republican positions. Infiltration suspected. This means the entire unit in the photograph died a week after it was taken, Elena said. And according to this report, it was because someone leaked information to the enemy. The paradox was chilling. If the soldier with the raised hand was truly a Francois infiltrator, why had he died along with the rest of the unit? Was his signal a warning that arrived too late, or was something more complex at work? Elena found another crucial document in the Republican General Staff archives. Operation Reconquest. Information leakage detected in Aragonese front units. Immediate position change ordered 4 units of the 14A, 15, and 16A divisions. Carlos, she said, look at the dates. This order was issued on the same day the photograph was taken. Someone in the Republican High Command knew there was an infiltrator, but the information arrived too late to save the 5th Division. But then, who was the soldier with the raised hand, the infiltrator, or someone trying to expose the infiltrator? To solve the mystery, they needed to identify the soldier individually. The 5th Division records contained a complete list of names, but no individual photographs. However, Carlos remembered the number written on the back of the photo, 231. Elena, what if this number isn't random? He said 23 soldiers in the photo. 23 soldiers dead. According to the report, the 1 could indicate soldier number 1 in some type of list or formation. The answer was in the archives. But discovering it would require venturing into territory far more dangerous than they had. Imagine the search for survivors of the now extinct 5th Division seemed impossible, since official records stated that all had died. However, Elena discovered a discrepancy in the archives. The report mentioned 23 dead soldiers, but the division's official list contained 24 names. Carlos, there's someone who isn't on the casualty list, Elena said excitedly. Miguel Santos Herrera, corporal of the 5th Division. His file ended abruptly after Belchite, with no mention of death or transfer. A search of post-war civil records revealed that E.A. Santos had survived the war and settled in Barcelona, where he worked as a mechanic until retirement. Even more astonishing, he was still alive at 99 years old. Living in a nursing home in Sitges, Carlos and Elena immediately traveled to Barcelona. Miguel Santos was frail, but his memory was remarkably clear. When they showed him the photograph, his eyes filled with tears. My God. I haven't seen this photo in 80 years, Miguel whispered, his voice trembling. I remember that day perfectly. It was the last day I saw my companions alive. Miguel, we need you to tell us about the soldier who raised his hand, Carlos said gently. Do you remember why he did it? Miguel remained silent for long minutes, as if reliving the moment. Finally, he spoke. His name was David Ruiz. He was very young, maybe 19. He joined our unit 2 weeks before Belchite. He said he came from Malaga, but something about him didn't fit. What do you mean? David knew things a private shouldn't know: troop movements, strategies, enemy positions. At first, we thought he was just very intelligent, but then we began to suspect. Miguel told them that on the morning the photograph was taken, he had intercepted David writing a letter in code. When he confronted him, David confessed that he was a Republican agent infiltrated in Francois ranks, sent to gather information. But there was more. David told me he had discovered something terrible, Miguel said. Another agent, but this one worked for Franco. He was in our unit, and he had sold our position to the enemy. The ambush was already planned. The raised hand in the photograph had been a desperate signal. David was trying to warn his Republican contacts that the unit was compromised. But it was already too late. Miguel Santos's testimony completely changed the direction of the investigation. It was not simply a case of espionage, but a complex double infiltration operation in which both sides had placed agents in the same unit. So David Ruiz was a Republican infiltrated in Francois territory. But he was reassigned to a Republican unit that contained a Francois agent, Alina summarized. It's like a game of mirrors. Carlos contacted the Civil War Studies Center in Salamanca to access Francois archives. What they found confirmed Miguel's account. There were records of an agent who had provided valuable information about Republican positions on the Aragonese front. But there was more. In the archives of the Francois Military Police and Information Service, they found a file on Operation Confusion, a plan to feed Republican agents false information, allowing them to be exposed to create distrust within Republican ranks. Alina? This means David Ruiz may have been the victim of a counterintelligence operation far more sophisticated than we thought. Carlos realized. The Francois not only had a spy in the 5th Division, they also manipulated David to appear suspicious. The plan was diabolically ingenious, allowed David to be discovered as a Republican spy to create paranoia and mistrust, while the real Francois agent remained hidden and continued leaking. Information Miguel provided a crucial clue to the real infiltrator's identity. There was a sergeant, Tomas Mendoza, who always knew too much about other sectors' plans. He was the one who organized our defensive positions. Miguel, do you remember if Sergeant Mendoza appears in the photograph? Carlos asked. Yes, Miguel replied. He's in the front row, 3rd from the left. Look at his posture. He's the only one not looking directly at the camera. He's looking slightly toward where David is. When Carlos and Alina examined the photograph with this new information, they saw the subtle interaction clearly, David raising his hand in an alarm signal and Mendoza watching him discreetly. Aware that his cover was about to be exposed, the photograph had captured not only a moment of propaganda, but the climax of an espionage operation that cost the lives of 23 men. The investigation into Sergeant Tomas Mendoza revealed an even more complex story. In French archives, Carlos and Alina found the complete file on Operation Confusion, where Mendoza appeared as the primary agent TM. Look at this, Carlos said as Alina read a classified report. Mendoza was not simply an infiltrator. He had been a genuine Republican until 1936, when he was captured by Francois troops and turned under threats to his family. The documents revealed that Mendoza's wife and children had been captured in Burgos and held hostage to ensure his cooperation. Mendoza was forced to provide information about Republican positions. But he also had a specific mission: to identify and neutralize any Republican agent who attempted to infiltrate units where he operated. So when David Ruiz arrived in the 5th Division, Mendoza immediately suspected he was an infiltrator. Carlos deduced. Instead of reporting him at once, Mendoza waited until he had sufficient evidence to prove his loyalty to his Francois handlers. Mendoza's plan was diabolically patient. For 2 weeks, he observed David, documented his suspicious activities, and prepared the ground for a major operation that would eliminate both the enemy agent and the entire unit, making it appear that David had been responsible for the massacre. Alina found the missing piece in an intercepted communication. Agent TM confirms Republican infiltrator identified. Requests authorization for sacrifice operation. Complete elimination of compromised units scheduled for October 20th. Carlos, this is incredible, Alina said. Mendoza sacrificed his own Republican comrades to maintain his cover and prove his worth to Franco. David Ruiz tried to warn them with his signal in the photograph, but it was already too late. However, one mystery remained. Why had Mendoza also died in the ambush? If he was a Francois agent, he should have found a way to avoid the trap he himself had helped organize. The answer lay in the final document they discovered, a direct order from General Mueller, dated October 19, 1937. Operation Sacrifice authorized. Agent TM must remain with unit to avoid suspicion. Sacrifice necessary for the greater good of the cause. Miguel Santos had been right from the beginning. David Ruiz had tried to save his companions with his desperate signal, but both infiltrated agents Republican and Francoist alike had been sacrificed by their respective commands in a macabre game where human lives were the currency. With all the information gathered, Carlos and Elena decided to analyze the photograph once more. This time, knowing exactly what to look for and using modern forensic techniques, they managed to decipher not only David Ruiz's gesture, but other elements that had gone unnoticed. "Elena, look at this," Carlos said, pointing to the digital enlargement. David's position isn't random. His raised hand points directly toward Mendoza, but so subtly that only someone trained in codes would notice. Even more revealing was the fact that other soldiers in the photograph showed subtle signs of tension. Their postures, though apparently standard, revealed palpable discomfort under closer analysis. "Carlos, I've been studying the individual faces," Elena said. "Look at the soldier right behind David. His eyes aren't on the camera, but on Mendoza. And the soldier next to Mendoza has his hands clenched into fists." The photograph was beginning to reveal the full story of those final moments before the massacre. David had managed to communicate his suspicions to at least some of his companions, but military discipline prevented them from acting openly during the photo session. Elena discovered another crucial detail while examining the soldier's equipment. "Carlos, do you see the radio the soldier in the third row is carrying? That's a long-range radio, not standard infantry equipment. David must have used it to try to contact his Republican handlers. But if he managed to make contact, why didn't help arrive in time?" The answer lay in the Republican communications records they had reviewed. David's message had been received, but it was intercepted and decoded by the Francoist intelligence service. Instead of preventing the ambush, the information was used to confirm that the plan was unfolding as intended. David Ruiz didn't just try to warn them with his gesture in the photograph, Elena realized. He managed to send a complete radio message with names, positions, and details of the infiltration. And that message sealed the fate of the entire unit. Miguel Santos had mentioned something else during his interview that now made sense. David had insisted that all the soldiers appear in the photograph, even those who normally would not take part in propaganda sessions. It was a final record. Carlos understood. David knew they were going to die and wanted evidence to remain of who had been betrayed and who the traitor was. The raised hand had not been merely a warning signal. It was a final act of resistance, a silent testimony for posterity. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Elena decided to trace what had happened to Tomas Mendoza's family after the war. If they had been used as hostages to blackmail the sergeant, there had to be some record of their fate. "Carlos, I found something disturbing," Elena said after a week of searching civil archives. Mendoza's family was never released after his death. His wife, Maria Mendoza, and their 2 children were executed in Burgos on October 25, 1937, 5 days after the ambush. What? Why would they kill them if Mendoza had fulfilled his mission? Because they knew too much. Look at this document. Operation Confusion Witnesses Eliminated for National Security. No evidence of employed methods can remain. The system's cruelty was laid bare. Mendoza had betrayed his companions to save his family. But Franco had ordered the hostages executed anyway to erase all traces of the covert operation. However, Elena found something more in the parish archives of Burgos. Maria Mendoza had managed to send a letter to her sister in France before her execution. The letter had been preserved by the family for decades. "Carlos, we need to get that letter. It could contain information about what Mendoza's family really knew about Tomas's activities. Contact with the descendants of Maria's sister led to an extraordinary discovery. The letter not only confirmed that Maria knew about her husband's espionage activities, but also revealed something unexpected. She had been secretly sending information to the Republicans about Francois' operations in Burgos, Alina. This means Maria Mendoza was also a double agent. While Franco used her family to control Tomas, she was passing information in the opposite direction. The letter included a crucial paragraph: "My dear sister, if something happens to us, you must know that Tomas never voluntarily betrayed his companions. I sent him false information about our well-being so he would believe we were safe. He died thinking he had saved us, but we already knew Franco does not keep his promises. The truth was even more complex. Maria had consciously sacrificed her own life and those of her children to protect the information she had been passing to the Republicans. Tomas died believing he had saved his family, while Maria died knowing she had served the Republican cause until the end." Carlos. The photograph captured not only the moment before a massacre, but the climax of multiple betrayals unfolding simultaneously on several levels. With all the pieces of the puzzle in place, Carlos and Alina were able to reconstruct the complete sequence of events that led to the tragedy of the 5th Division. "We have 3 simultaneous levels of operation," Carlos explained as he arranged the documents chronologically. David Ruiz, a genuine Republican agent, infiltrated to gather information. Tomas Mendoza, a Republican-turned-Francoist agent under blackmail. And Maria Mendoza, Tomas's wife, a Republican agent operating from Burgos. The tragedy began when David discovered Mendoza's double identity without knowing about the blackmail that drove him. At the same time, Mendoza identified David as a Republican spy, unaware that his own wife was playing an even more dangerous game behind Francois' lines. The photograph was taken at the exact moment David decided to expose Mendoza. Alina continued. His raised hand was a desperate signal warning that there was an infiltrator in the unit, but also a sign that he himself was about to be discovered. Events then unfolded with tragic precision. David sent his radio message identifying Mendoza, but it was intercepted and used to confirm Operation Sacrifice. Mendoza, believing he was protecting his family, provided the unit's final positions for the ambush. And Maria from Burgos sent false information both to her husband and to the Francois to protect other Republican agents. The final result, Carlos realized, was that everyone lost. David died trying to save his companions. Mendoza died believing he had saved his family. Maria and her children died after her husband fulfilled his mission. And 23 innocent soldiers died. Because of a chain of betrayals none of them fully understood. Alina found the final document in the Republican Arkivzan intelligence report dated a week after the massacre. Belchite operation, complete loss of 5th Division confirmed. Agent doctor transmitted valuable information before death. Enemy infiltration confirmed. Enemy agent also eliminated. Operation classified as a tactical victory despite losses. Carlos. The most tragic thing is that each of the protagonists died believing they had failed, when in reality, all of them fulfilled their missions with extraordinary courage. The photograph had captured not only the moment before tragedy, but the final testimony of 3 people who sacrificed everything for their ideals, unaware that their enemies had done exactly the same. 80 years later, the photograph of the 5th Division had become far more than a historical document. Carlos and Elena decided to organize a special exhibition at the Civil War Museum in Madrid, where, for the first time, the complete story of David Ruiz, Tomas Mendoza, and Maria Mendoza would be told. This image teaches us something fundamental about war. Carlos explained during the exhibition's inauguration. There were no simple heroes or clear villains. There were ordinary people faced with impossible decisions, trying to protect what they loved most in a world that had gone completely mad. The exhibition included Maria's letters, David's records, and reports about Mendoza. But the central element remained the photograph. 23 soldiers posing for posterity, unaware that within a week they would be dead. Victims of a web of betrayals none of them fully understood. Miguel Santos, now 100 years old, attended the inauguration in a wheelchair. When he saw the enlarged photograph on the museum's main wall, he approached slowly and touched the glass with trembling fingers. "Now I understand why I survived," he said in a broken voice. "It wasn't chance. David sent me to deliver a message to another sector the night before the ambush. He saved my life without me knowing why. Until today, I had lived with the guilt of being the only survivor." Alina had uncovered that final detail in the last days of the investigation. David had managed to get Miguel out of the danger zone by sending him on what appeared to be a routine errand, thus saving the only witness who could tell the story decades later. David didn't just try to warn about the betrayal, Alina explained gently. He made sure someone would survive to tell what really happened. "You have been his witness for 80 years without knowing it." The photograph was given a place of honor in the museum, accompanied by a plaque that read, "In memory of David Ruiz, Tomas Mendoza, Maria Mendoza, and the 21 soldiers of the 5th Division, victims of the multiple betrayals of a fratricidal war. Their sacrifice reminds us that in every war, the real enemies are not the soldiers on the other side, but those who manipulate people's courage and love for their own ends." Visitors from across Spain came to see the photograph. But now they looked at it differently. They no longer saw only soldiers posing for propaganda. They saw David Ruiz raising his hand in a final gesture of warning and resistance. They saw Tomas Mendoza living his last moments believing he was saving his family. They saw 21 men who would die without knowing why, victims of a game of betrayals that overwhelmed them. Above all, they saw proof that even in history's darkest moments, there are always people willing to sacrifice everything to protect others, even knowing that no one may ever remember their names. 80 years later, they were finally remembered.